So the first of the talks today is a fellow tutor who's currently teaching on the BA Fine Art and also works as a sculptor, is Desmond Brett. So
I was thinking this looks a bit like a kind of dance thing. We've got kind of audience set up and someone needs to kind of perform in the middle. I don't really want it to be me. But thank you for coming on. I don't know, sometimes it's, well, I'm going to use this kind of opportunity to talk about work that I'm doing right now. So if there's stuff that doesn't really make sense, then I'll be really interested to know if you don't think it makes sense either. So let me know what you think. Because I'm going to kind of air a few ideas. But what I thought I'd do is show you a kind of chronology of my work, because I've been making sculpture for some years now, but I thought it might be useful to show you the kind of stuff that I was making at art school as well, and then what I've done since. And it's probably not an unusual way to do it, but it's been really useful for me to kind of choose my slides and choose the images, because I've been looking at my work thinking, oh my God, did I really make that? So there are a few horrors along the way, but then again, that's part of it, isn't it? You're not necessarily going to make the best work all the time. But I did, this is probably one of my first pieces of sculpture as an undergraduate that I made. And I went to art school in London, so I did a 4-year degree in fine arts, and then I did a 2-year MA in fine arts as well. And I went to the Slade School of Art, which is in London, and I was very fortunate to stay on and continue my studies there. But it was a place where I had a really incredible series of tutors who kind of they weren't that interested in who you were, where you were from, what kind of accent you had, what you wore, anything. They were just interested in making stuff. And that's never really left me. I was profoundly affected by that, because I came from the wilds of Suffolk, and I hadn't even seen contemporary art. I didn't even know what contemporary art was. I didn't know what it was. And when I went to, in this first year at art school, I was exposed to kind of stuff where artists were making things out of sellotape and bits of roof tile and spit and stuff like this. I found it incredible, and I didn't realise that's what it could be. So I started making work with the cheapest materials I could find. That was skin. So I bought some bags of plaster and cement and started making sculptures with it. And this piece of work is from a series of sculptures I made, which were inspired by, believe it or not, the streets outside, in the roads, everywhere. And I was interested in the shape of street furniture and stuff that you can see, like fences. So this is an exact replica of a fence post, which might look a bit boring, but I was kind of interested in these things that are around me all the time, and I found them quite intriguing. The things like along railway lines or roads, motorways, steps, and kind of bridges and things like that, made out of concrete, this cheap stuff that you mix with water and make into things. Oh yeah, I've got 40 minutes to start coughing if I go over that, right? So keep them. Okay, so this one is a test for you then. If I was interested in street furniture, what was this?
A bench.
It's a bench, but with a twist. I was interested in removing all the other extraneous bits, like the wooden slats and the bits of the kind of pensioners eating their sandwiches on it, and I made this kind of so I recorded the kind of exact dimensions of the concrete steps or the stands, the supports for it. But I was interested in what happened when it was taken out of its context. So without the grass and the crisp packets and the pigeons, and I left and seeing it in a kind of a crisp space and nothing else around it, I was interested in that shift of context. But this is just cheap material. But I like the kind of I was interested in the language of building sites and roads and railways and all those kind of things that you see in the street furniture and the shape of them and all that kind of thing. So this is first year work. And I'm going to jump ahead to my final year's work as an undergraduate. This is some work I had in my degree show, but reshot in a studio I had after I left. And so I've gone for these kind of really minimal things to an interest in structures and materials that offered me an opportunity to kind of make things that referenced machinery or equipment. So this sculpture was kind of, I built it on a rail. So I was imagining it being like an expanded painting. So I had this kind of painted surface and a rubber shape on a kind of lattice, but it could slide along this rail. And I was thinking about how why things necessarily stay where they are, or if you move them along or change them and shifted their kind of form, what might happen to them. So I was interested in making things that had a kind of suggestion of function. It looked like it perhaps might operate in some capacity, but it was dumb. It didn't do anything. It was just this useless lump of stuff. And this one is another version of this. This was I was also kind of interested in exaggerating exaggerating things that did things. So this is my kind of alternative to a screw or a nail. And it was a machine that I built to fix things to walls. So it's a kind of, I was interested in making things that had absolutely ridiculous functions that operate in a really banal way, but over the top. So I engineered this kind of structure that sat on the floor, and you could see the twisty thing at the top, that kind of nut, and you could push things against the wall. And it was a machine a sculpture that was to assist holding things onto the wall. In this case, it's just a little drawing I made in biro and paper, but it was almost like the equivalent to sort of leaning against the wall. It was just a replica, just an alternative for an arm, but it could hold anything. And I put things like other people's paintings on the walls and bags of tomatoes and things like this. But I was interested in function and uselessness, and making things like overly engineered to do something really simple. Similarly, this piece was a sculpture that I built for my degree show, which was a sculpture that was both inside and outside a building, and I engineered a series of metal spikes. I said earlier I was interested in street furniture and stuff like that. Well, this was I was thinking about fences with spikes on top, like metal fences, and people leave gloves on them or shoes and things. And I was thinking about how dangerous they could be and making them safe. So I made these kind of turned metal spikes, and then chewed a lot of chewing gum and stuck lumps of chewing gum on the end of each spike. And then, so it was a kind of making safe, this thing that I built, this kind of really offensive object. So I don't know, but there might be a pattern there. I was making things that kind of had a sort of useless function. So I was making functional things that had a useless function, but very heavily engineered. So the actual process was a bit ridiculous. And of course I could have just bought the fence, or bought a load of needles or something and stuff. But I was interested in making them overly engineered, and importantly, this thing was sort of stuck out of the building. I'm not very interested in making things that look sort of soft and cuddly and cute, I suppose, or wasn't. And this is a lot of the shots on the degree show, so this will be some of you have to face the things I had to face. But finally, one of the big pieces in my show was a kind of structure that referenced things that kind of had a function, perhaps. I don't quite know what this was, but I was thinking about stands and supports and scaffolding, or like the side of those glass lorries that hold sheets of glass. Those kind of vans that have a tilted thing on the side and stuff like that. And I wrapped it in rock wool roof insulation, and then which in itself is a really nasty kind of material. It has this glass fibrous, and I coated it in plastic PVA glue to make it kind of safer and less offensive. And then used cable ties to kind of construct it. So I was kind of making this, wanted to make it sort of an object that was wrapped as if it was kind of like a present, but there was a metal structure underneath it, and wrapped and made into this kind of fuzzy shape. And again, perhaps it looked like it was meant to function for something, or was ready to be unpacked. A bit like kind of in a warehouse, you might find things that are wrapped and ready to be transported, or in the Amazon warehouse, you might see something like that. So that kind of language interested me. So I'm going to jump in. This is one of my, oh Christ, I can't believe I made this kind of thing. And we're now jumping to my MA show. You might notice it's the same studio I showed it. And this, what's in this made of?
Bin bags?
Bin bags? No?
Fiberglass.
It's not fiberglass, no. The clue's in all the stuff on the floor.
Is it manure?
Oh no.
It should have been manure. Could have been manure. Actually, I should have made something. It's made out of axle grease. So I made this kind of, this is my, the thing about doing an MA is it kind of forces you to question all the things you did as a BA student. I kind of had this blissful kind of 4 years as a student making stuff, and everything was great, and it was fantastic, and all this. But then my innocence was kind of pricked as an MA student, and I was getting hammered in crits and hammered in tutorials, because all the stuff I thought I was doing really well suddenly weren't going really well. and all the stuff I was used to doing, I suddenly couldn't make anything. It was just this ridiculous, nothing seemed to make sense. But then after a while I started to realise that what I needed to do was actually kind of get myself out of all the nice things that were comfortable to me and start making things that were really uncomfortable to me. So I don't like this thing, but the point for this sculpture was that I was trying to make sculptures that had a quality to them that was sort of outside of my kind of comfort zone, I suppose. So this was one of a series of sculptures that were made. I was trying to make kind of monstrous things that were kind of pretty much not pleasant to kind of behold. It was a deliberate kind of hunking, big kind of chunk of stuff that was visually unappealing or problematic I suppose. And so I made this structure that kind of perhaps referenced a creature or an animal or a boat or something. It was a kind of half organic thing. But I wanted to use a material that was unstable, had different stabilities of metal and plastic, all the things that I'm used to. And I made it. So I decided to use something like grease, which had the moment you touch it, this was lithium grease, so you can chuck it against the wall and it won't fall off. So I wanted something that had a direct response to my touch. So if I smeared my hand along it, the marks would stay where they were. So like a big impasto painting. You know, like a Frank Auerbach, painted Frank Auerbach, because these really kind of thick impasto paintings. I was thinking of him, that kind of the way a mark would just stay there. It was a tricky old thing to build and to hold, but the grease stayed there. I had these kind of rosy cheeks, these raspberry rosy cheeks, and I think it succeeded in being problematic because it wasn't comfortable to look at, perhaps. Well, some of you might think so, but and it kind of stuck in the middle of the space. I positioned it in the space to make it difficult to get around. You had to kind of edge around the thing. A bit like if you know that phrase, "an elephant in the room." You know that phrase, "the elephant in the room." I was thinking of that. You know, the thing that's kind of there, but this time it really was there and it wasn't hidden away, but it was just hunky great thing. I imagine how it must be like, perhaps if you were. Well, I've got very specific memories as a child. My father used to be in the Merchant Navy, and I used to join when I used to see him on the ships. I used to go along you have to walk along the quayside against this grey big hulk of a ship, which is enormous, and I had a very profound feeling of this mass in front of me, this great big thing. I was trying to sort of recover that feeling. Anyway, the other piece was a similar proposition, which was another sculpture that I built, which was again trying to make something kind of abject and problematic and sort of unpleasant, I suppose. But it was a sculpture that looked again like that kind of fuzzy ball thing could rotate, you could spin it around, and there's a kind of mouth, that kind of open sort of thing in front was a sort of drawing things in, like a kind of filter, like a filter of some sort, like a mechanical filter. And I covered this blank in grease and coated it in Hoover bag dust. So I collected loads of Hoover bag dust and sprinkled it over this sculpture. So it was this really strange kind of fuzzy thing. But what was intriguing was how different people's Hoover bag dust was, and you could pick out things like Christmas decorations, bulkheads, and things like that. But there's something kind of intimate about it. I felt this intimacy of skin and hair and all this kind of stuff. Have you ever poked through your Hoover bag material? It's incredible. So for me, it was kind of a privilege to use all this stuff from people who were donating kind of Hoover bag dust. And I built this kind of, it was sort of this really intimate kind of spewing of stuff. And so I don't know what you think of those two, but they were kind of, all that kind of cutesy stuff I was making as an undergraduate, and I was making all this stuff. But it was the right thing to do, and it was a really good opportunity to try things out. So then I leave art school, and then it's, shit, I've got nothing to do, I've got no money, where do I live? And I remember I scraped all that grease off and then gave it to my friend Adrian, he had a JCB digger, so he was brilliant, he was happy with that. And I packed all my stuff into my mini metro and left London. And I worked as a builder's labourer for a good, over 18 months or so. But on the back of that, and then you go through all this kind of, well, I don't know, student, I don't know to work. Then I was invited to do some work. I went invited by a tutor who came to visit me when I was an undergraduate in Poland. And it was probably one of the most profound experiences I'd had. Where I lived in a house that was completely self-sufficient. I'm going to tell you all this. They grew all the vegetables and stuff, and you could live there for a while. And I made a piece of work that was a complete break with other things. This was a work that we were given the whole use of this village to just, you know, the locals were brilliant. They help you with things. And if you needed something manufactured, there'd be somebody with a weld in their garage, or the off license. There wasn't an off license, but there was a woman who sold you vodka and stuff in her attic. This sort of thing. But I spent sort of 2 weeks there mulling over, like, what am I going to do? What am I going to make? I had nothing with me, so I decided to go for a walk, and I walked along there's a disused railway line, which, of course, in Poland has a tremendous resonance. If you know, considering the history of Poland and the proximity of Skopje, where this was on the border of Germany. So I was very struck by that relationship with location and site, and the way the railway line connected is a network, isn't it? It's a network of things, like an artery. And I was imagining what must have gone along that railway track, and of course that it doesn't take much to consider the implications of a railway line in Poland on the German border, that sort of thing. So I kind of restored a piece of the track so I polished it back as if it was little fragments of how it would have looked when it was used. So my sculpture was using a found piece of railway line, some sandpaper and some polish, and some elbow grease. And it was a really profound experience to sort of make something with so little. And I spent each day just kind of rubbing it back and rubbing it back and rubbing it back and rubbing it back. And so it was like a mirror finish, as if it was a kind of, and I was imagining what it might have been like when it was used and what it was used for. But also it became kind of interruption, like a pause in between, like a gap in between the weeds. And I'd like to go back there one day and see if I can find it again, or see the space, because having restored it, it'll have rusted over again. This is a work which, as an artist, you have to be kind of resilient and resourceful. And I haven't had a studio for 4 years, but it's not preventing me from making art. I kind of borrow things. I'll show you some work I did recently. I had to borrow my mum's garage. So don't think that as an artist you have to have a big white studio with cranes and easels and stuff. You don't. And as far as I'm concerned, if it means if you can find something to work, your studio could be your kitchen table. I consider my sketchbook to be my travelling studio. I really do. I think my sketchbook is my kind of space for ideas. That's my travelling studio. It follows me everywhere. So it's a really important thing to have. And sometimes you get an invitation to do something which will lead to something else. It's a bit like if you know the plumber who drinks down the pub on a Wednesday evening. You know he'll be looking for work, and then something will come out the back of that, and you'll get some more work from that. It's the same being an artist. I was invited to, I was teaching a student who said, "Hi, my mum's in, she's got this gallery in Cambridge." And I said, "Fantastic, great, I'll go have a look." This gallery is a London taxi cab in the front garden. So it's called the Taxi Gallery. And she wanted me to do an exhibition. She said, "Why don't you do make some work?" And so I made a work on the roof. I decided to build a roof rack, and the exhibition is called Roof Rack. And this is just an image of me building it with the straps on it. But I built these sculptures for the roof of a taxi. And so the buses would go past and people would stare at this sort of thing for a month. It didn't get vandalised either, but I was interested in making, the sculptures were informed by some work I was making at the time, which were kind of almost like they were sets for a play that never happened, like that kind of thing. They're sort of structures that might relate to a performance or something, but they were like apparatus, like climbing frames or slides and things. And then on the back of that, I got invited, this is almost like I'm charting my kind of life through art. But I was invited that show was seen by a curator called Michelle Cotton, who saw my work, kind of liked it, and invited me to take part in another show, which was a group exhibition. And this show was an exhibition of artists' work that used kind of everyday materials or kind of that sort of thing. And the exhibition is called The Bastard Piece, which is a line from a poem by William Carlos Williams. And The Bastard Piece is a poem he wrote about a piece of wasteland, a little scrap of land, and you just notice that nothing really happens in it, but it's full of life and full of things really happening if you look close enough. And I really like that. So I made some sculptures. The sculpture on the left is a series of trays that I acquired from second-hand shops, pound shops and things. And I made this kind of stack of shelves on a pub stool. And it was deliberately meant to look a bit like, it was anthropomorphized. I was wanting to make it look a bit kind of like it was drunk. It was a pub stool, it was kind of like a pissed kind of person leaning against it. And then the piece on the right is a series of battens, and I'd forced some bits of carpet into the ceiling. I was interested in space, the kind of space of ceilings. You know, why should I make a piece of work on the floor when I could use the ceiling or the corner of a room or those kind of spaces? I was thinking about kind of spaces that I don't always use. Another piece made out of canvas and wine glasses. And then finally a piece which I made along a window, which is kind of my first attempt at that point of making something. Have you heard the phrase site specific when artists talk about being site specific or site specificity? You know that phrase? Come across that? Making something for a location, and the location was a window overlooking a river. And I was imagining, well, what's the opposite to a river? This river was kind of rushing past the gallery, and I kind of thought about ash from bonfires. They're kind of almost like the opposite state to water. You could argue that it's cinders from a fire. So I built a kind of cinder depository, so people were invited to kind of dump barbecue stuff along it. I needed it filling, and then it overlooked this river. So I was interested in the relationship between opposites, a bit like the rust and the polish and that kind of thing. So, how does that work? Okay, so another work has been. I don't actually know if I have a style, so if you think I do, please tell me, because I'll be really interested to know. I feel like I'm a kind of. I feel I've got different people locked up inside me. I've got different artists inside me, and I'm really interested in that about style. Because I'm not sure I'm that interested in having a set style or one particular style. I'm sometimes suspicious of that, but also I admire it too. So it's a bit mixed up. This is a drawing machine I made for an exhibition. I was invited to make a piece of work. The show's called Demarcation, and I was invited to make a drawing machine. So I built. I had 2 weeks to build this structure. Now, there's nothing else in the gallery but this pillar. And I was really interested in making something that was kind of tied to the pillar like a dog on a chain. And so I built this kind of. I built this thing which was architectural, and it could sort of stand across this space, and it was on wheels, so it could move or it couldn't move. So if you touched it and moved it, it would kind of bounce around on the floor and slide around. But I built these metal sprung pegs which you could insert a stick of graphite into, or it had a piece of graphite into it, and then to leave a mark on the floor. Do you know the word? Do you know what palimpsest is? It's a word for a drawing over drawing over drawing. So after a week, the floor was like a kind of skating with graphite, because the piece got moved. And every time it moved, it left a mark on the floor, a trail on the floor. And I really liked that, making something that was a drawing, but I had no control over it other than it being lashed to this post. Can you see that like a hoop on the bottom of the post? So it would never stick, it would just keep rolling around, but it was tied to this kind of post. It could only go so far. So the extent of this drawing would only go as far as the post would allow it to. So it's kind of like an architectural screen, like a screen with a drawing sheet. So on to another show. I'm a member of a collective and artist gallery in Norwich called Outpost, and I've had a number of shows there. And this was my first ever solo exhibition. Never had one before. And the temptation was to kind of fill it with stuff. But I was interested in making an exhibition of the kind of my current state of mind. So what I was doing, what I was interested in. And so I made a number of pieces of different kind of propositions. This was a series of library shelves that I had kicking around in my studio, and I made this sculpture. I wrapped it in cling film and made this sculpture. So I made a sculpture of cling film and library shelves. But I really enjoyed the transformation from the state, just two things that probably cost me about a couple of quid from Heron Foods or something, just to wrap this thing, and it became like a big boiled sweet. But also again, like, do you remember that piece I showed you, the yellow piece, like something that was almost ready to be unwrapped? I like the kind of potential of an object that's kind of hidden. The kind of form was suggestive, and I plonked it in front of the door, so it's kind of like where Heidi's standing now. It was kind of right in front of the entrance to the gallery. So when you came in, you'd be faced with this kind of thing in your face. And I also built a wall, and I've been making, since then, making some objects in ceramic. And I was making some drawings out of clay, really quite rough, rudimentary drawings. And I built a wall that's kind of pegboard. You know, have you been into a hardware shop or something where you have kind of punched hole wall? It's very hard to find that. But so I built a wall with this. The idea was that I wanted to suggest a kind of a wall that things could be added to, or these objects were just, there were only about 6 or 7 I put on the wall. I made loads more, but I wanted it to be like a bit like those shops where things are pegged and hung on the wall that could change and move. And they're simply drawings or things I'd observed in the world. I'm actually really interested in what stuff outside. So these were drawings I've made. When I say drawings, I consider these to be drawings. And these were drawings I made in clay of things I'd seen. But I hadn't kind of recorded them in any great, I just sort of from recollection. So the top left pieces are speakers, like announcing speakers in schools or buildings. But the bottom left sort of zigzag Z shape is actually the outline of a house sign. without a number, you know, like number 63, bungalow or whatever. And the bottom right would come hooks, loops on a bus. And you had standing on a bus and holding into the loops. But I like that transformation into clay. Some work again from, well, this is from 2009. So this is an exhibition I took part in the University of East Anglia. Has anyone ever been there? The Sainsbury Centre. It's got a big ethnographic collection of work, and the exhibition was about community, it's about the idea of culture, what culture was. And I've been making a series of works called about this notion of community, what community is. Because I feel it's a very politicised word. What is a community? How do you define a community? Is a community you and me? We're a community, are we? Or is it people over 60? Or is it people from different cultures? I don't know. And I thought it was interesting to do a show in a space like this. So it was kind of a privilege as well to make work next to Francis Bacon and next to a piece of Polynesian art. The painting is actually Francis Bacon's painting after Van Gogh. It's a series of paintings he did after Van Gogh. So I thought I liked that a lot. So I did this kind of display called It's Our Community, and it was I've been photographing hundreds of words, the word community in different places. It's everywhere. If you listen to any political diatribe on TV or any rhetoric, they'll always talk about community. To sort of buy votes, they'll tell you what your community is. You can be given publicity that tells you that the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community, or the community of your street, or whatever it is. And that it's almost like, well, how easy is it to define? So it's a rolling loop of images that just clicks through. It's like a film, and it's become a kind of a bit of a tick. Actually, I can't stop recording these damn words. They're everywhere. And I built a wall as well. So this was a kind of a useless wall, because for me, the epitome of a community is this notion of enclosure, and actually what wall represents being a kind of is it to enclose or to free, or is it to trap? And from Berlin to Beirut, this wall has a very potent symbol, doesn't it? If you think about the resonance of what a wall is. But of course, this is a wall you can walk around. And I like graffiti. I like how people desecrate or decorate objects in the street, buildings, whatever. So I was very interested in that relationship, and because in a way there's that community as well. I've also worked in fabric. So does anyone have a problem if an artist doesn't make their own work physically? Because I've never done this before. I asked my sister to make me a piece of sculpture for a show. So I asked her to make me a rag rug, and I gave her the dimensions and what I wanted on it. And she built me a sort of doorstopper, and it's called engine. And on one side I had the word known, and on the other side unknown. And you could roll this along because we kicked around the floor. But I like the idea that the two would never meet. Unknown and known were always on opposite sides of this sausage, this floor sausage. And it was exhibited in a library. So the point of it was that this power at your fingertips. I was responding to the issue of what a library could be and is. And I like this. It was about potential, basically. It's about this idea of potential. And the exhibition is called Symbols Are Promiscuous, and it was about the kind of littering of images in the world and the littering of information that we have.
Did your sister get credit for the work?
Yes, she did. Yes, she did. She did. With special thanks. You must do that, everyone. Whenever you do a show, don't forget to credit people, because it simply puts their noses out to join if you didn't. But yeah, Jean's helped me a lot, and there's another piece coming up that she helped me with. You have to be resourceful as well, because I can't make rag rugs. But I like the idea of something that was handcrafted, that was also called an engine. I like the relationship, because an engine isn't necessarily a thing you stick in a car. So I like something that moves and functions as an engine. But yeah, she's certainly got credit. Fantastic as well, fantastic work. Okay, another residence I did in Holland. How am I doing for time? No one's started coughing yet, so I'm giving you, how am I doing?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock, right, okay, right, I'll hurry up. So I did a residency in Holland. Again, as an artist, you've got to be resourceful, and things happen. You might apply for stuff, you might apply for stuff, you might apply for stuff, nothing happens. You get turned away. It's like sort of sending a CD if you're in a band to your record company and go, no. Sometimes you get a bite. And I was invited to take part in an exhibition, a residency in Holland, in Eindhoven. And a residency meant I was given a space to work in, an old factory, and I was up to stay there, and it was me and a couple of other artists. And I spent a month there making work, and at the end, all we were asked to do was do an exhibition at the end of it. And I found this old scrap kind of yard down the road, which had loads of blinds. In Holland, everyone seems to have blinds on their windows or screens and stuff. So I built a structure out of blinds, which for me was kind of like a cross between a painting and a sculpture. I like the space of the wall and the floor. Why does a sculpture have to be this big rocky lump that you've carved in marble? It doesn't. You know, what's two-dimensional, what's three-dimensional? And it's kind of like a drawing as well. And yet also in Holland, being Holland, there's a strong reference to a particular artist I admire. Do you know who that might be?
Mondrian.
Yes, top marks. Who said that? Wendy, well done. Yeah. Top marks. It was Mondrian. I was really, I couldn't, I was I kind of so taken by Mondrian and so struck by his kind of gridding of things. So this was kind of slumped onto the floor, and almost like it was sliding up onto the floor. And I like that relationship between the floor and the wall, and the space of it being sculptural and being painted. But then I hit upon a way of working which is kind of stuck with me. And I made a series of sculptures which were kind of never meant to be, but they were a process. I was thinking I was going to make something else, but I started casting. I went back to cement, and I built a series of pieces that were kind of two-dimensional drawings or three-dimensional sculptures or anything. Three-dimensional drawings, two-dimensional sculptures. I don't know what they are, but they were a number of. I was casting sheets of concrete, cement, about a centimetre thick, onto the floor, and in kind of small kind of pens of metal, and I just poured them in. But I laid baler twine onto the floor and then poured the cement over the top and skimmed it over. I was recalling my kind of years skimming walls as a labourer or skimming floors and things like that. But what happened was, which really excited me, was there was this kind of right. Well, what I was trying to do was I was lifting them out, and I was going to make something else. But as I lifted them out, they started breaking, and I really enjoyed the relationship between the material, the cement, which is really brittle, it hasn't got any innate strength. But the actual the nylon twine kind of kept it all together. So the two relied on each other, and it felt really profound, like a profound experience to notice these two relationships. So the series of works since then have been called Bound to Break, and I've made several of them. But I like the relation between the twine, which became like a sort of Jackson Pollock-esque drawing on one side. Have you heard the phrase recto verso? Have you come across that in painting? Recto verso. Recto verso means front and back. And if you, particularly in sort of Northern Renaissance painting, there are recto verso screens where there's an image on one side and the back on the other side. So for me, this was kind of like a recto verso drawing. There's the cracks on one side and the baler twine on the other. But also the innate weight of the material kept them upright. So these things would stand up on their own. So the weight of the material would keep them up. So I was excited by that kind of the possibility of them being discrete forms that kind of had their own weight and form. And the form is the form is kind of informed, if you like, by the material. So that it felt like a really neat sort of circuit. It wasn't very woolly. It was just cement by baler twine, and they could stand up and they form their own pieces. So here's another version of this, which is a show I was involved in Norwich, in an outpost. But this time I changed it. You see the difference in these. Instead of that neat, crisp end, I left the baler twine sort of spewing out the end, and I like that. It was suggestive of continuity. These things were like fragments of a much larger. I was interested in that the kind of imagery of dereliction in, say, buildings being destroyed, or the metal rods that stick out of buildings when they can smash up. Have you ever seen these? That kind of thing. Which, of course, you see in war zones, don't you? When buildings are bombed or attacked, often you see these things being, this kind of the stuff kind of sticking out of it. And another version of the same thing. So these have been a kind of ongoing concern, an ongoing interest to me. So there's sort of one side being this kind of image, this spaghetti-like image. All right, so this one is again a piece that's been we're kind of getting a little nearer now to. The Keeper is a piece I've been working on, which was a farm sign that I found in a field, and I drilled about 5,000 holes in it. And I was interested in this. Sometimes stuff kicks around. You might collect stuff and not really know what the hell you're doing with it. But I acquired a load of old photographs, just old analog. I was interested in the kind of obsolescence of things, and this obsolete sign and discarded photographs, and I put the two together and made a kind of library, like a library of images, but they're useless because they're kind of rolled up. and inserted into these holes. And they were rolled up like little sort of roll-up cigarettes and pushed in. So it became a kind of hole. But you could pull out any one if you wanted to and have a look at them. But it was kind of like a bank, a library of useless images. So there's kind of there's a bit of a theme of uselessness. But I found it a very intriguing thing to be involved in, because all those kind of memories and experiences and events that are kind of rolled up and shoved into this space, this thing, holding on to it. That's why I call it the keeper. A work I made in Cambridge was I was using a kind of security screen, and I was given a shot to use, and so I was very struck by the backing paper in this shot, or this used stamp shot, was green on one side and red on the other. And so I placed this kind of I gilded some corrugated iron, some old sort of corrugated shed iron, and made this kind of painterly. I'm not a painter, but I'm very envious of painting. I'm really, really envious of painting. I think I've got a painter locked up in me as well. Somewhere in me is a painter. I think I like more painters than sculptors. What's that all about? But this is my kind of the nearest I've ever got to making a painting. Okay. On the outside was a piece, another community piece, which is this. It's called Collective Representations, and this is a tarpaulin which I stamped with the word community. I had a rubber stamp made in a stamp shop, and it was kind of a dumb exercise, but it became a kind of landscape, but also perhaps like a spectre, like a ghost, like a phantom in this shop. About community. What is this community? It's mutable, it's changeable. So it was appropriate for me to put it on this kind of tarpaulin that I could squash into this space, just as much as I could open it out on the floor. Does that make sense? Kind of like the relation between the image and the thing and the material. Am I making sense at all? This one is right. This is a piece of work in a show that I did, which was a response to literature. Again, you see, sometimes you're almost like a kind of jobbing artist. You get often these these opportunities to do something and respond to. And I collect stuff, and I collected this piece of fence. I thought it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. It's a piece of fence from a college I used to work at. But to build a new entrance to them, the workmen chopped up this fence. And before I got stuck in a skip, I kind of managed to hold on to it and grab it. And it kicked around in my studio for a long time. But on the relationship with literature was this piece, which is Herbert Reed's book called Art and Industry, which is a very dated book by Faber and Faber. And in the middle of this, basically it's about art and industry. It's about the Industrial Revolution and what happened after that. And the big difference was you had like the decorative arts and you had the Industrial Revolution. And just to paraphrase, there's a page in the middle of the book with one side is a German sewing machine on page whatever. And on the next page, there's the same company have made the same kind of sewing machine, but one is before the Industrial Revolution and one is after the Industrial Revolution. And the difference is this first sewing machine was covered in gilded, it was kind of painted and it looked amazing, had lots of lovely decorative stuff on it. But the one after the Industrial Revolution is just functional. There's no decoration to it. It's just this kind of, they're both sewing machines, both do the same job. But one had all this lavish kind of stuff all over it, but the other one was really functional. And I really liked it. It was almost like that moment where you step. There's a place in Iceland where you can step between two tectonic plates. There's the kind of Atlantic and the European. You can literally stand on two things. And I felt the Industrial Revolution, this page was a bit like that, this massive shift in things. What does that mean? Well, I was interested in this relationship with this fence. This fence is this kind of industrial, metal, functional piece of stuff. But I found it beautiful. I find that fence far more beautiful than any Renaissance painting. That's going to shock you, isn't it? For me, the Mona Lisa is one of the most boring paintings I've ever seen in my life. How about that? We can talk about it afterwards, but I'll have that any day. I'll have that fence any day. That fence post, that railing, the Mona Lisa. Sometimes you have to kind of play around with stuff, and I've been making quite a lot of objects to kind of help me with my ideas. I draw a lot, but sometimes I make things to draw. So these are a series of sculptures that I made to draw, and they're just things I've collected, just bits of crap really, but like, you know, a stack of rubbers with a little badge on top made out of porcelain, or a box of matches and a piece of flint on it, or a little plastic dog from a Christmas cracker with a big weight leading on its tail, or an army badge with some toy bales on it and a little chicken. I don't know what they're not necessarily meant to kind of have any narrative, but I was just thinking about the relationship with materials and shape. and then the drawings I make of these then inform the sculptures. Okay? A recent work, how am I doing for time? Still okay? How am I doing for time? 10 minutes? 10 minutes? Well, I'll keep on. I've been making a number of pieces with, again, in that kind of interest in the relationship with kind of industry and materials. And I was invited to do some work for a show that was about rural life, which is kind of, this could be disastrous. But I've got an abiding interest in kind of cartoons as well, cartoon imagery. And this particular one was I was thinking about the kind of image of a cartoon where these people are kind of shooting out of a, they're being surrounded by kind of what are soldiers and they're shooting. It's a cartoon image of the Confederates and the American War of Independence, and they're shooting by these bales. And I was thinking of country and western hoedowns and stuff like that. The kind of real cliched country stuff, the kind of stuff where people have fights in pubs and smash chairs over their heads. This piece is called Good Old Boys. It's this kind of bit of a knowing kind of nod to kind of western films, country and western films, or people crying into their drinks and smashing their cars off and wearing denim. Again, cement seems to be holding a place for me. This work is called Mirror, which isn't a mirror. It's not a mirror at all, but it was based on the shape of a mirror. But I like the ridiculousness of a concrete mirror. But actually there is something in that, because there are some mirrors made out of concrete. Do you know where they are? Have you ever seen a concrete mirror?
Is it on the coast?
Yes, it is. Yeah, exactly. It's on the coast. It was built, there's some mirrors on the south coast that were built in the Second World War, so you could listen to German planes coming over the horizon. Mirrors. Because you don't necessarily look in a mirror. Anyway. I did some work. I've been making work recently which has also included materials, relationships between materials, and this is kind of like a scattering mess, but also it might be to do with a work like this was a response to, this was an exhibition at the seaside in Great Yarmouth, and it's not without accident that I acquired some material for deck chairs. So I built a work which is, Vaux is the kind of, the title actually is the name of, it's near a station in Yarmouth, Yarmouth Vauxhall, and the station is abbreviated to VAUX on the tickets. But also it's named after an English painter called Mark Vaux, who died quite young. He was an English colourist painter. He could have been a big player, but he died young, crashed himself in a motorbike accident. But he made paintings that were very pared down and colourful. So I felt like I was making a homage to him. You can do that as an artist. You can make homages. Have you ever done that before? Paid homage to another artist in your work?
Yeah.
Have you tried it?
Yeah.
What did you do?
It's still life.
It's still life.
But I pay me for him.
You made homage to him in whiteness?
Yeah.
That's a great idea. You should all do that. Make a homage to. That's really good.
It's Vanitas.
Vanitas. Yeah, make a homage to an artist. Do it. It's. Think of your favourite artist and make a homage. Think of the most obscure artist and do a homage. Okay, guess who made this? Guess who helped me make this piece? My sister made it. Yeah, Jean, she helped me with this. And this was a reference. This is a very overt reference to my abiding love of 1950s British sculpture. Well, American sculpture too. But does it look a bit 50s?
Looks like those coat racks that you have.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's referencing. You know, this kind of ball, nuclear shaped ones. You know the ones. That's exactly what it's referencing. So I've been interested in kind of referencing my kind of things that get me. There's really linear, spiky kind of shapes. Right, well, this is something that I've just done a show actually. It was curated by some curators called Palace Empire in Norwich in an outpost. And this is the same piece. They're really interested in this. I've been making a series of drawings in space. I'm really interested in sculptures that are flat and sculptures that are linear. Like a sculpture that you can sort of fold up and. Actually, these are really easy to transport on trains. I don't have cars, so you can stick them in a bike rack on a train. Brilliant. You can just stick them on the train. You don't have to pay. I tried to get charged for this. I was trying to take it down from Hull to London, but it's not a bicycle, so I don't have to pay for it. But this is a sculpture based on a drawing I was given by a friend of mine of another artist. Another homage. This is another homage. I've been making these kind of sculptures of hands, like fingers crossed, and the piece and all those kind of references that we use with our hands. But this is one that really stuck with me. It was again in that residency I had in Holland. I met this guy called René Daniels, who's a painter, and he's paralysed. He had a stroke, And all he could do was stick his thumb up. He came to see our exhibition, and it was such a thrill to meet Rennie Daniels. Have you come across Rennie Daniels? Amazing painter. And this guy was shuffling around the gallery, and all he could do was stick his thumb up and just grunt. And it was almost profound, such a thrill to meet this guy, and to know that he was going great, fantastic. And that was really, it was so kind of liberating. Anyway, my friend Lee, who's another artist, Lee Grangy, so there's Desmond Brett doing Lee Grangy, doing Rennie Daniels. So I did a sculpture of a drawing that Lee Grangy did of Rennie Daniels. It's like sort of 3 stages of kind of passing things on. And that's what the sculpture's about. And some pretzels, no, they're not really pretzels, but it's a series of works I've been engaged in, and I'm still making them at the moment, which are, I told you about cartoons, and I'm interested in the relationship with kind of cartoon imagery and sculpture, and these are clouds. I've been really interested in cartoon images of clouds that you see in Disney or whatever, Warner Brothers cartoons, any kind of cartoon, or graphic novels, Batman, all this kind of stuff like that. And how cartoon clouds are made. It's a sort of generic cloud, really. It's just it's a cloud you might see in a comic. But I was really interested in making it sort of ironic. And so the irony for me was making something that was so damn heavy that you couldn't, it's hard to lift. It's unwieldy. It's a dirty, great cloud made out of iron and plaster. So this thing rusts and rusts and rusts. And I like the relationship between something lightweight and fluffy and puffy like a cloud and something chunky and heavy and physical that I've made. I like the discrepancy between the two. Does that come across? Do you get that? So I was kind of interested in those relationships. I've been making some drawings I'm making some fountains as well, some other pieces as well. So this piece is called Puff, because certainly in graphic templates there are names that are given to certain kinds of graphic marks and lines you can use. So this is Puff. This is another cloud I think, which is out of just welded steel. So it's like a drawing. You stand next to it and then it kind of disappears. I've been making some drawings, clouds based on Dutch ceramics as well. So the illustrations on the side of certain vessels, the kind of the blue porcelain vessels, things like clouds and water and whatever. And this is some work I did in the Minories Gallery in Colchester. So this is made out of resin and polyester plaster and resin. And it's kind of a bit shonky and a bit clunky, but if you enlarge these things from the little drawings on a plate, it is actually quite kind of wonky. These things are they're hand drawn, they're hand painted. And this one's called Puff, which is out of welded steel and iron as well. So I like the kind of name, the relation between the word, the name, the title, the thing itself, and what it's trying to aspire to be. And the notion of puff in slang terms and puff. There's a sort of slang terminology there, rather degrading kind of terminology to something, to somebody, and it's offensive. And the actual sculpture itself is clunky and it's leaning against the wall. It doesn't stand up on its own. Drawings have included action drawings, so I find drawings everywhere. I find drawings on labels. These were drawings I kind of transcribed from a packet of wood for Kindle. Oh right, yeah, we're right at the end. Don't worry, we're almost there. Okay, 3 minutes. So these are my latest drawings. So I told you I draw a lot. So I've been kind of drawing things, ideas in my head, which aren't necessarily functional or they have any sort of great sense. But again, I told you my sketchbook is like my kind of studio. So I've been drawing spaces in my sketchbook, like these kind of horizon lines, as if I'm making things in reality. I'm not worrying about what they're made from. I'm just trying to kind of describe things, shapes that I might imagine or build. They're working drawings. They're not refined. They haven't taken a great deal of time, but they're just me mulling over shapes. Now these are a new set of drawings I've been interested in, where they're sculptures, but they kind of have different qualities, like they're kind of made out of stuff. I'm almost trying to make instinctive structures that I then respond to. I don't know, I like that bottom on the bottom right. I don't know how the hell I'm going to make it, but I'm enjoying that kind of challenge of how the hell I'm going to make it. Is it almost like a kind of tree on a climbing frame, or is there a kind of is that wavy thing made out of fabric, or these are the kind of problems I'm interested in. That top left one, is it a big kind of canvas sail with a big eye sticking out of it? Well, what the hell does that mean? I don't know. I'm trying to respond to these drawings and make kind of sculptures that are true to that. They look like the drawings of a madman. I hope not. Because I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes I don't quite know where my work is coming from or what it is, but what I do know is I'm interested in shape and materials and objective form. So then there's no narrative, there's no kind of there's no narrative or relationship with necessarily the real world. I'm not really interested in drawing trees or plants or flowers or faces and things. They don't interest me. What I'm interested in is the things I've never seen before, and that's kind of why I make sculpture. So and how the hell am I going to make these? These are kind of these are my kind of problems. These are kind of problems I've got, which are good problems to have. I imagine them kind of almost like Baroque shapes or pieces of kind of architectural details, but I've enlarged them. Anyway, you can critique me. That's it, done. Under 40 minutes.